Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
We'll give folks a few more minutes.
Let me get this background.
Good evening. I think we're going to give folks maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. I think we're still waiting for a few task force members.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi.
Okay, I think we're just waiting on Shayla. We'll give her 1 more minute, send her a quick email. Okay, I think we have everyone. Just do a quick check. Yes. Good evening. We can call the meeting to order. During the last meeting, I mentioned that we would take turns reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and it would probably be easiest if we went in alphabetical order. So I'm going to ask Shayla to lead us.
Wow, thank you very much. And obviously, this is something that I should know by heart. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to which it stands. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know.
It's okay. And to the republic
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible.
indivisible, with liberty.
and justice for all.
Yay!
There you go.
Promise I'll learn that.
I emailed it to you late today, so that was probably my fault. I'll take the blame. But thank you, appreciate that. So with that, let's move to agenda item number 3. I'm going to ask Councilmember Shine to assist in administering the oath of office to swear in our newest task force member.
Thank you, Jasmine. I received communication from board member Williams that she was intending on moving, and so because of the residency requirement, I needed to appoint a new task force member. She will be missed, but Alexander, I'm so excited to appoint you. You are incredible. And so with that said, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I
I,
say your name,
Alexander Moore,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that while serving
that while serving
in the office as a member
in the office as a member
of the Social Justice Task Force
of the Social Justice Task Force
of the City of West Hollywood,
of the City of West Hollywood,
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of California,
of the State of California,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution
to the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of California,
of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well
and that I will well
and faithfully discharge
and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations, Board Member Moore. And thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Councilmember Shine. Welcome and congratulations, Alexander. We will move to agenda item number 4, roll call. Please say present after I say your name. Shayla Demure,
Present.
Krupa Desai,
Present.
Alexander Moore,
Present?
Shannon Morton,
Present.
Jorge Sephiroth, I feel like you're here, Jorge. Maybe we just can't hear you and your audio is. Okay. Giselle Washington.
Present.
Jonathan Wilson.
Here, present.
Marcus Wilson Smith.
Present.
Daniel Zamilpa.
Present.
Great. Moving along to agenda item number 5, approval of the minutes. Was everyone able to take a look at the minutes? Great. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the May 25th meeting?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of MILPA.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Okay, so this is the portion of the meeting dedicated to public comment. I didn't receive any registered participants for the evening, but if there's anyone on the call who is interested, feel free to use the raise your hand feature. Yeah, I'll give folks a few more seconds just in case. Okay. We will move along to agenda item number 7. Many of you probably already had the opportunity to view the information staff included in the introductory packet, but we wanted to take some time to unpack some of that information, specifically as it relates to the city's structure and operations. So I am going to share my screen and let me know if anyone has difficulty viewing it. Can everyone see my screen? Awesome.
Yes.
Sorry, there's a lag on my computer here. Okay. So many of you probably are already aware, but the city of West Hollywood was created out of a collective group of LGBTQ community members, renters, and seniors who voted to form a city that would be known for promoting social justice, protecting the rights of community members, creating a city with a high quality of life, and providing social services for everyone who needed them. The city of West Hollywood operates as a contract city. And what that essentially means is that we contract with different government agencies, private companies, and nonprofits to provide services to West Hollywood residents and community members. The city also utilizes a council manager government. The elected city council serves as the city's primary legislative body and appoints a city manager to oversee the day-to-day operations, including drafting a budget and implementing council's policies and initiatives. The council members serve 4-year terms. Every year, the council members select one member to serve as mayor for a 1-year term. The city is a whopping 1.8 square miles, and it's home to about 36,000 residents. And in regards to police and fire protection, the city of West Hollywood contracts with the LA County Sheriff's Department and LA County Fire Department. So when we talk about the types of cities, there are cities that operate wholly without contracting with outside agencies, and those are called full service cities. So full service cities are capable of funding and providing a complete array of in-house public services to residents without contracting out with third-party agencies. So a few examples include the ones listed here: City of Beverly Hills, City of LA, and the City of Santa Monica. Obviously, West Hollywood is a lot smaller than the City of Los Angeles, but we are kind of sandwiched in between Los Angeles and Beverly Hills. But we wanted to paint a picture of the differences between those cities and how some of the recommendations that you'll be making may affect or be a little bit different considering what type of city the City of West Hollywood is. All right, and now I will turn it over to John Leonard to talk about government structure.
So good evening, task force members. Thank you, Jasmine. As Jasmine mentioned, we thought it would be helpful to talk about the structure of the city and how the city operates, because that will be a real important part of the recommendations coming forward. There are certain recommendations we can bring forward more easily than others. So I'm not going to spend too much time on government structure here, but I wanted to provide this overview just so that the task force members can see that there are a lot of layers of government that provide services to our residents within West Hollywood. Certainly, and I'll kind of group these together. We have the federal government, the state government, and the county government that all provide certain services, but don't provide the city with much funding. The federal government mostly provides funding for the military and funding for health services such as Medicare, Social Security, but then also some large-scale infrastructure and labor such as unemployment. At the state level, more than 50% of the state's budget is for school funding. So the state provides funding down to the school districts throughout the state. Within West Hollywood, our schools are provided by LAUSD. The state also plays a major role in unemployment, as well as the federal government, infrastructure funding, and then other healthcare and social services. So getting a little bit closer to home, the county government, over 50% of the county's budget is on health services and public assistance, so different social services. Those programs are provided to our residents, though we don't have a significant amount of say over how they are provided to our residents. More recently, the county has also taken a lead in homeless services, though our city also has a robust amount of homeless services. But as some of you may know, there have been county ballot measures passed for funding for the county for social services. The county also provides funding for the sheriff's department in their unincorporated areas and some other portions of the county. So getting into our local city government, and we're going to get into this in more detail in the following slides. Our city government, the majority of our spending goes to, actually, can you go back one more, Jasmine? Thanks. The majority of our local spending actually goes to wages and salaries for city employees that provide services to our residents, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But we also provide a lot of local social services that are in addition to those provided by the state and county, and are particularly focused on our residents and our constituencies. We also, and a lot of the work that city staff does is implementation of our city regulations. One of the examples I like to use for that is our city's rent stabilization and housing ordinance. So we have a very strong rent stabilization ordinance that protects our renters in the city. And we have a number of staff people that help our constituents understand the rent stabilization ordinance and help them with disputes when they arise. We as a city also provide funding for and build affordable housing. And one of our other major expenditures is our public safety budget with Los Angeles County Sheriff. I also mentioned that there's some other regional agencies that provide services into our city. So the Metropolitan Transportation Agency provides regional transportation services into our city. Metropolitan Water District provides water into our city via the city of Los Angeles and Beverly Hills. And then there's also the Air Quality Management District. The next slide. So in walking through our city departments and structure, we thought this would be important because we're going to take some deeper dives in the future on some of the really specific programs that we have in the city. And we're actually going to ask the task force which items they would like to dig into more. But I want to give you an overview of the departments and the divisions and briefly what each of them do. So the city manager's department, which we as community and legislative affairs are a part of, provides large executive level policymaking and guidance to the city. And that includes our division. It includes preparing the city's budget, risk management, economic development throughout the city, and then our city attorney services. Our community services department, which is led by one of our assistant city managers, provides some specific items related to architecture and property development. So we have an urban design and architecture studio that is headed by our city architect. They review all new developments coming into the city and also provide zone text amendments and different recommendations for how to improve the urban environment, the physical urban environment within our city. Our innovations department is a forward-thinking division that looks to implement, amongst other things, broadband service throughout the city, electric vehicle charging stations, and look for innovations that our city can lead moving into the future. Our property development division looks to develop city-owned properties. And this is a topic that we can look at further, but we have a number of city-owned properties, including the vacant lot at Crescent Heights in Santa Monica. The city owns part of the block directly north of City Hall, and some other scattered sites throughout the city. Our property development department is also in charge of affordable housing production, which is another topic that we can get into further at a later date. That essentially the city provides funding for affordable housing, as well as other agencies, the state and the county included. And that mix of funding is what is used by nonprofit developers to produce the affordable housing in the city. And that's 100% affordable housing. We also have an inclusionary housing ordinance where 20% of any property built within the city includes 20% affordable housing. The next two departments are internal departments, meaning that they serve our staff and the city internally and are not outward facing to the public necessarily. The first is our city clerk's division, which keeps our records and also helps run all of our city meetings. Our human resources department runs human resources for our city. And our legal services division helps with different legal matters throughout the city, but also particularly provides oversight in legal matters regarding rent stabilization. Our finance and technology services department is also internal. We have our accounting division, our revenue division, which I'll touch on a little more at the end, but then also information technology. Our public safety department is a little bit interesting because we are a contract city. So our public safety department oversees our contract with LA County Sheriff and kind of some of the day-to-day operations of them in collaboration with our station captain. In terms of county fire, we actually do not contract for fire services within the city. The county fire department receives a part of the property tax that is collected in the city, and they fund their own services and provide those in West Hollywood. Some of the services similar to that are not necessarily unique to West Hollywood, but somewhat unique to us because we are a newer city. So since we're a newer city of only 37 years, all of these services were in place previous to our incorporation, as opposed to a city like Beverly Hills or Los Angeles that has been around for over 100 years. So a lot of these services were in place and we adopted the existing service delivery models when the city incorporated. A part of our public safety department is also event services, and they produce large scale events in the city such as Pride and Halloween. And so the remainder of our city departments, one that we will be talking about more with the task force is our Human Services and Rent Stabilization Department, which consists of 3 divisions. The first is our Social Services Division, which oversees over 24 social service contracts throughout the city that provide a wide array of services to our residents that are in need. So we will be talking more about this in the future because this is very comprehensive and more than almost any city within the region provides, and was one of the founding principles of our city to provide the social services for our residents, particularly in the AIDS and HIV epidemic of the 80s and 90s. Our Strategic Initiatives Division houses our homelessness response and homelessness services, and also houses our Aging in Place strategy, which was adopted about 5 years ago. And as mentioned previously, our Rent Stabilization and Housing Department primarily serves to administer and oversee our Rent Stabilization Department and assist our residents with that. Our Communications Department is both inward and outward facing. It includes media and marketing, digital media and arts, essentially all communication, social media, cable TV going out through the city goes through communications. Arts is a new addition to our Communications Department, but our arts division is very robust. Currently right now, we're doing One City, One Pride, which is 40 days of arts programming. But as you've probably seen, there's a lot of public art throughout the city. There's a lot of arts programming throughout the city. And we have a number of staff people and a robust budget within the arts division. For our facilities and recreation services, this is actually where a lot of the contract services come into play, or provides a good example of contract services. Many of our facilities and field services, such as tree trimming, street sweeping, these are all contracted services. These are not city staff providing these services. We contract with an outside company that provides these services for us. Recreation, we have several parks. We have a new recreation center that is coming online later this fall, and our Recreation Services Department staffs those parks and provides programming there. One thing that's interesting of note that was talked about in our city budget discussion last night at our council meeting is that our new recreation center is going to be larger than any other city facility that we have right now. City Hall is roughly 20 to 30,000 square feet. Our new recreation center is going to be almost 70,000 square feet. So that's going to be a heavily staffed and heavily programmed facility for the city. Planning and development services. Our planning department intakes all planning permits coming into the city, but also provides strategic long-range planning for the city. What is the city going to look like 5, 10, 20 years from now? One item that division is currently working on is bringing Metro Rail into the city, which we have been heavily backing and working with Metro to accelerate that project. Lastly, our Public Works Department includes code compliance. That goes back to what I'd said earlier about implementation of city regulations. Our code compliance division ensures that businesses are operating properly and responds to different concerns from residents. And our engineering division provides infrastructure throughout the city, and our parking services, it's pretty self-explanatory, operating our parking structures, our parking meters, and issuing parking violations. So going back to us being a contract city. So here's some examples of services that we contract for as a city, which means that we execute contracts with outside agencies to provide these services. We have oversight over those contracts. We can dictate what those contracts say for the most part, and we can decide who we contract with, but they are not city employees providing the services to our residents. This is essentially the case for all of these except for the first one. So with the Sheriff's Department, we have some say over what the contract says, but the contracts are pretty consistent throughout all of the contract cities in the county. The only other option with public safety for us would be our own private police force. However, we do have some other security related services that we have used to supplement the Sheriff's Department and not increase the Sheriff's Department budget over the years. And one of those is the block by block security ambassadors, which I'm sure many of you have seen out and about in West Hollywood. They are the individuals either walking or on bikes in blue uniforms, and they do not carry any weapons, but they are out there to increase safety and security within our community. We contract for homeless outreach services with different homeless services providers throughout the county. As I mentioned, we contract for a number of social services, which we will talk about at a subsequent meeting. Local public transit, so we provide local transit services within our city, including the city line and the pickup line, and then Metro provides more regional transportation through our city via Metro buses and hopefully expansion of the Crenshaw rail line into the city. Maintenance services I mentioned, we contract for city attorney services, and then there are other professional services as well. I touched on this a little bit, but there are also other agencies that provide services within our city that we don't necessarily have a contract with. We have some sort of an agreement with them, but a lot of these are holdover service providers from when the city was incorporated in 1984. I talked about Los Angeles County Fire. Los Angeles County Library is the same. They receive a portion of the property tax revenue from the city and operate the library. Trash collection is done through a franchise agreement with Athens Services. And as I mentioned previously, there are different utilities, water service, electric service. Those are not provided directly by the city. They are provided by nearby agencies. And the reason I mention this is because there are a lot of cities that directly provide utility services. And that is not how we operate, and that's mostly because we are a newer city. Next. So the last thing I wanted to touch on, just to give a more general sense of how the city funds services, is what our key revenue sources are as a city. So we are a small city, though we have a robust budget for a small city. And that is a result of where we're located in central Los Angeles. It's a result of the type of uses we have in the city, particularly entertainment uses and hotel uses. So our number one source of revenue in the city is hotel tax. That is tax paid by hotel guests based on how much their room rates are. Our second largest source is sales tax. And at our last election in November, residents passed by about a 70% margin an increase to our sales tax rate in the city. We also receive a significant amount of property tax. There is business tax, and the majority of business tax is cannabis tax on our cannabis businesses in the city. That ballot measure was passed several years ago in March. Parking meters and parking fines, as we all know, parking is in short supply in the city. So parking meters and parking fines are a source of revenue for us. As with all cities, fees for services, which are essentially the cost of submitting a planning permit or a reduced rate for a recreation service, are also sources of revenue. And one of our newer sources of revenue has been negotiated billboard and sign payments on the Sunset Strip. So we are moving forward with a project to convert a number of our static billboards on the Sunset Strip to digital. And because the city is permitting those changes, we are receiving a flat payment per year for those signs or a percentage of the revenue. So I hope that provided a little bit of information about the city and how the city operates. We wanted to do this so that as we continue in our discussions, there is an understanding from the task force members about, the different cities departments, different city services we offer, and we are always happy to answer any questions and provide any more detail. And we will actually be looking to the task force members to hear what types of services I mentioned, maybe affordable housing, social services, the task force would like to hear more about, and we can have in-depth discussions. But a lot of the recommendations that we would envision would come out of the task force are going to relate to these different divisions and departments. So thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you so much, Don Leonard, for walking us through that. In terms of these contracts with the different organizations, how much of that is something that we're able to put our input through, as far as what these organizations look like, who they employ, things like that? what does that look like?
Sure. So our contracts run for specific amounts of time, typically 2 to 5 years. So all these contracts are in place right now, but we put out new RFPs for these services quite frequently. So I think that there is definitely a significant amount of room for the task force to provide recommendations that you're talking about. It may not be implemented immediately. It would likely have to be implemented the next RFP round for those type of services. But those occur pretty frequently. Those occur every few years. So it's actually good timing to allow, if there are recommendations that come forward from the task force, it then allows us some time to put those recommendations into the request for the proposals and issue them. So yes, I think there's a good opportunity for that.
Thank you.
This is Jonathan here. Question for you. Have we had a desire to be more self-sufficient in the past? I mean, and if that has been something that we've had a desire to be, what are some of the barriers or obstacles to achieving that you may recall?
Sure. So there's a lot of advantages to the contract model for smaller cities. A lot of that is financial. A lot of that is overhead costs. One of the key reasons to be a contract city and contract for a lot of services is long-term pension costs. So the city does not have pension costs when we contract for services, and any in-house employees, we do have those pension costs. Fortunately for us, this is partially because we're a younger city, but also because we're a contract city, our pension liability is quite low. And our pension costs each year that we pay into the state retirement system is quite low compared to other cities. There are cities in the state, even such as the city of Los Angeles, where significant portions of their budgets are going to retirement costs, retirement medical costs, and pensions. In some cases, these can reach 50% of a city's budget. Our pension costs right now are approximately 5%. So that's a real advantage for us to be a contract city. And it also allows us to really be more nimble in some of the service providers too, because if a service provider isn't performing, we can look for other service providers. So that's an advantage too. When it's in-house, sometimes it's a little bit harder to change quickly.
I appreciate that insight. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I have one more quick question. In terms of talking about performance, engaging, how we have felt that these certain organizations have A, performed, but B, also been inclusive and, respectful towards our marginalized groups that we are specifically here to speak about. How is that information shared, and how will that be shared specifically to this group?
I will say, I think there's room for improvement there. I think that a lot of contracts are kind of behind the scenes, and a lot of contracts include performance metrics, but it's more related to the specific service. So I think there's opportunities there to increase those performance metrics and specifically tailor them to other items besides just the services themselves. So I think there is room for improvement there because most of it is tailored directly towards the service right now.
And to just kind of to Daniel's point, we're able to influence at some point kind of the RFP questions that may need to be asked. We're able to influence the RFP process, I guess you say, maybe as a whole.
Correct. And my suggestion would be if there's things that are important to us from certain service providers, that would be the type of recommendation that we would hope that this service provider, really works with our constituents or provides X, Y, and Z type of service or provides us with metrics. We may not have to get as specific in terms of the questions in the RFP, but if we can give specific goals for them, then we can incorporate that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sorry if I'm just trying to clarify a little bit. Love the questions that my fellow task force members asked. On the RFP process, though, can we influence sort of the pool and the requirements the pool that we're looking at before we move forward in the process. And I apologize if you already hit that, but I think I was hearing sort of like metrics on the back end versus on the front end, like who are we talking to, what our procurement process is.
Yes, we certainly could. So I think that there could be, as we were talking about kind of on the back end, on the front end, there could be recommendations and goals about how the service providers are ranked, and the type of weighting that goes into the selection process and the review. So yes, certainly.
Thank you.
So I'll ask a question. So does this allow us room to perhaps have some implement prerequisites, like maybe their board being diverse, or being 80% women, or people of color, et cetera?
Yes, I think it does. There are other agencies, there are larger agencies throughout the county. I know that Metro has provisions like that in their procurement of construction contracts and other professional services contracts. I know that other cities do as well. So yes, that is something that we could put forward as a recommendation that could either be across the board for all of our contracts, or we could look at specific targets for specific contracts or categories. But yes, and I think that's actually a little bit to what Krupa was getting at as well. We are able to say what we want those service providers to be made up of, and then also, or provide additional weight within the process for those that do adhere more strongly to some of those items.
Great. Was there no more questions? Thank you, John.
Thank you, everybody.
I actually just realized I inadvertently was looking at the old version of the agenda, and I skipped our GARE team presentation. So my apologies to Robin and Aaron, but we will move to what is actually agenda item number 7, and I'll turn it over to them.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Jasmine. My name is Robin Eason. I'm the long-range planning and sustainability manager, and also have been leading with my counterpart here, who will introduce herself in a minute, the city's GARE work. And so we're really excited to be here. We've been following the formation of this task force, and are thrilled to be able to share with you some of our work thus far with the city. So I'll let Erin introduce herself. Oh, you're on mute.
Rookie mistake, man. Hi, everybody. My name is Erin Hammett, and I am the Senior Administrative Analyst with the Facilities and Field Services Division. That's within the Facilities and Recreation Services Department that you just learned about. I'm going to share my screen in just a second, but we wanted to introduce ourselves while we were able to see everybody. It gets difficult once we share our screen. So we submitted a informational staff report that reviewed our initial rollout strategy, the DEI definitions that the city's adopted, our GARE 2021 work plan, as well as other accomplishments to date. So I hope everyone's had a chance to take a look at that. Now I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to present to the task force tonight a presentation that we actually did in February to City Council. And then we would love to answer any questions, get your feedback and comments, and talk some more. So let me do that. Oh, you know what? Jasmine, I'm blocked from sharing. If you could enable that.
How about now?
Yep, thank you. All right. It's so hard to see with all the other stuff up here.
think you can do presentation mode. It might be easier.
Yeah, that's why I don't know how to hit the button. It's
Down
covered
below,
up.
in the lower right.
Go to view. You can
Yeah,
also go
you're
to
right
view
there.
slideshow.
I was gonna say, you can hit that button right there.
Yeah, okay. Thank
Yep.
you, everybody. I'm so sorry. That's usually not what happens. All right, so I'm gonna kick this off. In July 2020, the city of West Hollywood joined GARE, which is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, to leverage the national momentum on racial equity and justice. And GARE is actually a program of Race Forward. So Race Forward is a national nonprofit. It was founded in 1981, and it works to transform institutions and partner with communities to move policy, culture, and narrative for racial justice. The Government Alliance on Race and Equity is a joint project by Race Forward in partnership with UC Berkeley's The Othering and Belonging Institute. And you can see here, I included in the staff report, but also on this page, the link to find public-facing resources, which I'll show you a little bit more on a future slide, but I just wanted to call that out for anyone that wants to take a deeper dive into GARE and its resources. Additionally, Race Forward has Facing Race, which is the nation's largest conference on racial justice. So, and then there's also the annual GARE membership meeting. And then the guidance and the network provides lots of toolkits and information. It's accessible to government employees. So we'll share more about that. But something that's not membership needed, which I would really recommend everyone to sign up for. It's a great newsletter. It's called Color Lines. That's produced by Race Forward, as well as their podcast called Momentum. So here is an image of the national network. It's comprised of 302 government agencies from 36 states and includes 155 cities. So West Hollywood is one of those cities. And then I just took a screen grab of California specifically, just to show that there's momentum, beyond just the city of West Hollywood. It's a whole national movement. It's growing. They're actually having to transition. GARE started, Race Forward was founded in 1981, but GARE and their racial equity and racial justice project started in 2014. So it's just getting bigger and bigger. Next is, this is just a snapshot of those public-facing resources with the link that I shared with you all. It's got some really great info. I know you were just talking about RFPs. So, they have one tool called Contracting for Equity, work that were, the two ultimate goals of GARE in our timeline right now is by the end of the year, we want to create a racial equity statement for the city. But our overarching goal is to create a racial equity action plan. So there are two different documents that are public facing related to what a racial equity action plan is. And additionally, there's some other great tools, including communication tools. So wanted to point those out. All right, next. So since GARE is a forum that is set up as, a national network. So we have a portal that we access. And through this portal, we share tools, best practices, accomplishments, and lessons learned with our various members that go beyond the city of West Hollywood. And our member benefits include a myriad of items. We have the online member portal. There's different peer-to-peer conversations, working groups. There's also an employee assessment that the City of West Hollywood's currently undergoing. We have our annual membership meeting, which occurred this year in May. So we sent a delegation to that. We have the annual sorry, I just said that, the annual membership meeting. Then we have quarterly and monthly regional connection meetings on various topics, as well as GARE 365 webinars. And one of our main requirements as a GARE member is that we need to contribute at least 2 items every year to the field of practice to keep moving the work forward. So we're happy to share that we have reached those 2 goals for this last year. So we've almost been a member for a whole year, so it's very exciting. And then here's a list of our 9 GARE teams that were formed. In addition to GARE, which I think it's important to call out and define it as a specifically racial justice lens, racial equity lens. It's not justice in general or equity issues in general. So the underlying motivation behind GARE and its focus specifically on race is since race is a determining factor of success for most people, the data, predominantly shows a disparity and a difference of outcomes, that if we really drive and look at race specifically, then outcomes for all of the other equity issues will also get better. So that's why GARE is specifically on race and not equity in general. So just want to point that out. And so as a companion to GARE, but driven by some other staff members, the city also formed a diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee. So we do have another group of staff working specifically on DEI topics. In addition, I know I have public safety on here, and I also wanted to just call out that joining our GARE check-in meetings, we meet with everyone once a month, is the LA County Sheriff's Department. So they are involved in our GARE conversations. And thank you, Jonathan. All right, so now I'm going to pass the baton over to Robin to wrap this up. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Great job. Yeah, so like Erin said, we wanted to lead with race because race is often the key predictor of outcomes and treatment of individuals. Racial inequities, like the slide says, are deep and pervasive, and usually no one wants to talk about it directly. And so, because words matter and because specificity matters, by being really deliberate with our focus as we approach this work and by leading with race, we start to uncover various inequities. And if we know better, then we do better. And so the image to your right is really illustrating GARE's national best practice, which is to normalize, organize, visualize, and operationalize racial equity into the fabric of an organization. So said another way, the aim is really to have a shared understanding of language used to talk about race. And in your packet, I'm sure you've seen our attempts at normalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of defining those particular terms for the city to use both internally and then eventually externally. We want to begin to create and develop a shared culture and partnership around racial equity. That's the organization part. And then operationalizing, really embedding racial equity tools into the practices, policies, procedures, et cetera, to achieve our desired outcomes. Next slide. Next slide, Erin. Okay, so using GARE as a resource, the city's in the process of really learning how to apply racial equity lens to our work, be it our work plans, be it the budget, be it how we collect data, be it our programs, our projects, procurement. You guys had some great questions earlier related to your influence in our RFP selection, which is really great to hear. And we'll be able to leverage hopefully some of those recommendations that come out of this task force. And so as we continue to progress on the how, the intended outcome, like Erin had mentioned, or the what, is to eventually have a racial equity statement and a racial equity action plan. ultimately, what we are aiming to do is to ensure racially equitable outcomes for all West Hollywood community members, including the ones within the circle that you see there, but also those community members like our unhoused neighbors, and also those that are utilizing our social services. West Hollywood's approach to community membership is not just residents or business owners or property owners, it's everybody who enjoys our city or is within our city in some capacity. Next slide. So this slide indicates our accomplishments to date. And so, we kicked off our membership in July 2020. We then had a all staff presentation to introduce GARE to city employees, and then assisted the various employees that were interested in being an individual member with those portal registrations. We also then worked with the DEI subcommittee to start to draft the diversity, equity, and inclusion definitions. From there, we worked with GARE. They offer what they call a GARE Foundations training, which is, I guess you can call it a racial equity one-on-one training. And so they allow a small cohort of GARE members to cycle through those trainings on a recurring basis. And so we've had a number of staff take those trainings, and we'll continue to offer that throughout 2021 as GARE offers that. We've also produced some internal intranet resources where staff can go and find different racial equity resources as tools and trainings for them to help them with their work and achieve some of their divisional goals. We worked with Hernan Molina, with our government affairs team, to influence the 2021-2022 legislative priorities this year with council. And finally, we administered a baseline employee assessment, which is a feature of every GARE member, is to have a survey that we offer to employees to kind of assess the knowledge of racial equity and the desire for training and tools to help educate our employee base related to racial equity. And the idea is that it would be a longitudinal exercise. So we've administered that survey this year. We're actually compiling the results this month, and we'll share that with staff next month. And then the idea is that we would run that survey again with our employee base in 2 years to see how we've progressed in terms of our collective understanding of racial equity and how we've applied that to our work. So it's really kind of a measurement tool to assess our progress over time, which is really great. Next slide. Okay, and this is our final slide. We just wanted to go through really quick our 2021 work plan. And so I would say Erin and I kind of approached this work knowing a few things, but really wanted to discover with our employee colleagues of what makes sense for West Hollywood and for our various departments moving forward. So by 2021, we started to have some idea of what various divisions were doing and sort of where their knowledge levels were at to be able to then formulate a work plan for 2021. And this is sort of ever evolving. I would say maybe a living work plan as we learn more about what we're doing and our opportunities that are available. Will continue to kind of add and contribute to this work plan as necessary. But basically the goals are to continue to conduct check-ins with the various division teams and assist them in achieving various racial equity goals, obviously relying on GARE for resources and access to experts. We are interested in curating a kind of data collection working group that's really looking at collecting data based on race so that we can educate ourselves and have more data-driven decision-making within the city related to our operations. We are also really excited because we want to bring together a lot of the division teams, which we've been meeting with on an individual basis together to start to learn from each other about what they are doing in this space. We have divisions at different levels of either understanding, aspirations, or advancement in racial equity. And so we thought it'd be good to bring folks together to be able to learn from and apply best practices moving forward. We want to continue to explore new definitions that we can bring as proposals for city adoption. And I talked about the survey already. And then finally, as Erin said in the beginning, we want to draft a racial equity statement for city adoption by the end of the year. And so, we're really excited to be here with you all. We are planning to actively track the conversations that come out of this group. We meet with Jasmine, she's part of the city manager's GARE team on a monthly basis as well. And so we'll have plenty of opportunity to understand what's coming out of this group and how we might apply some of those recommendations, thoughts, feedback to our work moving forward. So with that, I think that's the end of our presentation, and we will open it up for questions.
I have a few questions. Should I only ask one at a time, or how does that work? I guess I'll start.
Bring them on. Bring them on.
Yeah. So one. So that diagram where you had the four kind of circles, and you talked about businesses being one of them. So how do you define businesses? And I kind of feel like there's two different types of businesses. So, those that, do business in the city of West Hollywood, meaning like they exist here. And then those that actually do business that this spans their geographic footprint. So they're actually, the residents or the people that are, or the other businesses that are here are doing business with them, right? And they may not necessarily have a geographical footprint here, but they may have a service footprint here. So, I mean, how are we looking at those differently? Are we looking at the same? Like, what's the thought process on that?
Yeah, I think I guess I'll go, and then Erin can chime in too. That slide was really depicting that we want to be inclusive of everyone that we can utilize that's in this space within the city, right? So it could be the businesses that have a physical footprint here, but it could also be those that are served by the businesses here as well. We look at community members as being both and, not either or. And so I would say maximum inclusivity is what we're aiming for.
Good. And then I have another question, which is around, was there active thought around, and this kind of speaks to Krupa's point earlier, was there active thought around suppliers and partners, having a special bubble for that, right? So versus just saying, because I would say that they're kind of unique and maybe not necessarily considered in the businesses category or any of the other categories.
Can you restate the bubble's name again? Sorry.
So it would be something around suppliers and partners of the city of West Hollywood.
I don't think we've ever thought about that, but I don't see why they wouldn't be included. Yeah.
I think it's unique. I think it's a unique group, and to Krupa's point, like there might be an opportunity to look at that with the unique lens or the in terms of the RFP process. Who are we doing business with, et cetera.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
And then the last question I had was the survey results that you were talking about. How and I love that. I love surveys as listening mechanisms. So my question to you is, how do those survey results get disseminated to this group?
Go ahead, Robin.
I was just going to say it's more of an internal employee survey to really kind of help us assess where we are in terms of the knowledge base of racial equity amongst our employees, and then also what they feel they might need in order to, I guess, be more competent in their racial equity understanding, and also how they then deploy and apply a racial equity lens to their work. So it's a bit more of an internal process and an internal communication.
Okay.
I was gonna say I would refer to it as a readiness survey. So one thing that as part of that new framework, the normalize, organize, operationalize, and visualize, this past year, we've really taken a lot of strides in the normalizing, right? Like most people aren't comfortable talking about race at work with each other, let alone leading like a public meeting on race with community members. So the readiness survey is really to start to talk about it, figure out what employees need, acknowledging that we are doing this, but trying to prepare everyone so that it doesn't fall on just a few employees' shoulders, because the outcomes that we want for everyone means that all of our work plans, all of our budgets, all of the goals and pursuits of West Hollywood will include everyone. So I'm sure we could share like a summary of findings, but we probably wouldn't share like the whole survey.
Right. Yes, and I understand that. So maybe it's more of a summary of findings. Maybe that's the key takeaway.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, yeah, I think we can provide a summary of the findings because I think it's important for the task force to look at. I think that's one of the key buckets that we may be looking at, because our staff does provide so many services throughout the city and we're one of the largest employers in the city, that if there's kind of some general feedback from the survey and general things we could look at that the task force could make recommendations on, I think that would be important.
Yeah, absolutely. Are those all your questions? Do you have any more or anybody else?
Question, do we know how diverse the city is? I'm just wondering. So you do these readiness surveys. Do we know who or how diverse you are? So do we know what our, all of us are diverse, but what does the city actually look like? Do we know that? Does that come with the findings?
Yeah, there is a community study. I see Robin shaking her head, so she'll follow up from me, but that was released, I think 2 years ago, that has that information in it. One assessment, so there's 2 spheres, right? So that circle that we saw and all the different, I would call those almost like your spheres of influence, like what are the different kinds of conversations about race that we need to have? Who is the audience? What do they care about? That helps us start to shape that conversation. So when we talk about racial equity in the city of West Hollywood, there's actually, beyond the more community-facing spheres, there's community at large, right? Which that sphere of influence tried to break down, which is our external work, right? But we have our internal work too, which is the treatment of the city to its own workforce. So the evaluation of our own employees and the, what is the diversity of our employees, that's actually going on to our HR's work plan. So that's something we're working on. So we don't have that part of that question, but we have the community part already done.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask Shannon, so was the question more related to the city as a whole for our residents or the city workforce internally at City Hall?
I think maybe I was confused. So the readiness survey, was it only given to City Hall, every City Hall members, or just your brown and black folks, or is everyone, or?
With everyone.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's only staff. So it was only a staff survey to make a baseline assessment of, have you ever taken a racial equity training before? Does your department talk about racial equity goals? Does the city as a whole, like there were different questions, but it was for employees. So it was more of a internal survey, not that external one.
I do have a follow-up question / just general comment to Shannon's note. At least within my industry and specifically within entertainment and marketing, I think what we often find is that the diversity comes within the multicultural marketing team, within the diversity inclusion team, and it's not reflected within the other departments that also play into it. So if you have any information on that we can pull out department by department, that'd be incredibly helpful as well.
Good feedback.
Agreed.
Thank you.
if we want to make a motion around something, do we do that now? Or do we do that later in the meeting?
This was just the information, receive and file. So we're taking your notes, but I don't think it really requires a formal motion.
Or not related to this, but this spawned an idea for a future agenda. So I guess.
So I think that, so we have an item later in the agenda that's kind of next steps and future agenda items. So, and I think we were actually going to ask, based on all of our discussions today, based on the city structure discussion and the GARE discussion, which things have kind of piqued the task force members' interest and would like to see further discussion of at subsequent meetings.
Yeah, no, this is great feedback. Anybody else? And have any questions or comments?
I just have one quick question as it relates to namely the work that the GARE team is working on, but I guess generally as it relates to what we're all doing here is, I think that a lot of the discussion that we've had is centered around the agencies and where the specific funds are going to within the city of West Hollywood. I think that from a social perspective, there's so many elements that play into all of this. We have a great, nightlife here. We have great restaurants. There's a large amount of ways that this, I think what we're trying to accomplish feeds into everything that plays into West Hollywood. What is are we talking only about things that, XYZ West Hollywood funds go to, or how does this, what the work that your team is doing, how does that disseminate into like all aspects of West Hollywood life?
Yeah, we're still exploring that actually. We're working with the various divisions to, in some ways for us, we really needed to kind of understand what some of the other divisions were doing already, right? And so, for instance, like our strategic initiatives team that, works a lot with our Met team in public safety and our unhoused community, they're already kind of out in the forefront of a lot of their racial equity work and applying that lens to how they deliver their services and how they're thinking about different offerings for the different constituents and subpopulations within West Hollywood that they serve. So that's maybe the best example of how some of these discussions are coming to light, and how in those various monthly meetings, we're kind of uncovering a lot of the different divisions' day-to-day work, and then thinking of ways that racial equity can be applied to some of those things moving forward. And so a lot of this is internal work to kind of really get at, okay, what if the city has always been doing? How have they been delivering on their services or functions? And how can we start to change that narrative? And then how does that start to impact, like how do those changes within a division, within ourselves, within the department, how does that then translate into how we change for the better, improve how we serve the community through that racial equity lens?
And I would just add that if there are external things that we want to look at that maybe are outside of kind of the purview that Aaron and Robin were talking about for GARE, that's certainly something we can look at. It may just be a different vehicle for how we achieve those, but we can work through that.
Amazing, thank you.
I'm going to pick on some people. Krupa, Alexander, Jorge, Marcus. Do you have any comments before we leave you tonight?
No, I appreciate it. I've worked with Race Forward and appreciate Color Lines as well. So glad that that's been part of your work too. I might have more later, but I'm still percolating.
That's fair.
I agree. I'm glad that something's happening in-house, trying to get to the root and discover some root issues to look at and examine. That way, and I feel like we as the task force can bring in the outside elements and missions that we should take care of.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Sorry, I know I'm a little quiet today as I was just sworn in 40 minutes ago. I haven't been here for the first meeting, so I'm just kind of taking all this in today. I think I definitely am kind of an action person. So when you take, it's good to have this kind of information and to have this base there so we can know what to do. But like my next steps, I do events normally professionally, so I'm always going to the next steps of how do we actually use this information and create progress and create change. So that's kind of when I listen to these presentations, I try to think of how they're applicable, kind of the information, rather than just kind of gathering dust on a shelf saying we did something, but now like let's all step forward into how we can help more. So if I seem quiet, that's because that's what I'm doing. But thank you.
But that's really helpful though, because it flags us to start figuring out when we want to come back and report, right, on different items. So thank you. Good feedback. All right.
Jorge?
Oh, yeah.
Hi everybody. Well, sorry, I've been having some problem with the computer, my phone. I was like, oh my God, where are you? Now, I'm just back at work since this last week. I've been crazy, this city is going crazy everywhere, I've been having hard days, but happy to be here and tired, but I'm with you guys. Yeah, I always have a question. I always been wondering because, I come from South America, I live in different countries. And I always, since I moved here to West Hollywood, I always thought why we have to have different areas, like the area that I live is like a little Russia. So that, what they call it like in those ways, and make people think that, so I don't belong here, it's things like that, I think that we should be more open and people be able to live wherever and have, not be certain areas that you think that it just belong to some people. I always thought that that's something that they need to change, why people need to be just in a group. We are not a group, we are all together. So I think that always was in my mind, why we have to try to all separate, from each other. Even my neighbors, I have neighbors that they belong to the Russian community, they feel like they have to be just in their groups. I think that's time. Plus, this was Hollywood. These are people from all over the world, and I don't think that everywhere, every or race have an area to be called mine. So I think that that's a thing that I always have in my mind. Why it has to be not just in West Hollywood, there are little areas, like little Armenia, little things. So yeah, that's what it was. I think that we need to try to move forward and try to make people feel like they are all together.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm aware of 6 neighborhoods just in West Hollywood, which is 1.9 square miles. So definitely something we'll be thinking about.
All right. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Arian. Appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move to agenda item number 9. I will turn it over to Diane and Crystal.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Diane isn't able to make it today. Unless she was able to jump off, but she did have something come up last minute. So I'm here to lead our discussion, but we prepped together and we're in good hands. So I wanted to say it's been lovely to listen to this conversation because it really flows into what we planned in terms of discussion and not in terms of content around what more information that does this group need to make decisions, which I know this is how we're going to wrap up the agenda today, but what are the different ways that you show up, or as committee members, what are the roles and orientations that you hold, particularly when being specific about spheres of influence. So I love that got brought up around spheres of influence, because there are some times when the information can be overloaded, right? And we're like, okay, well, how am I going to approach this? What is my role? How exactly am I going to intake this and respond? And so the way that the Aspire group thinks about the role of committee members is really helpful and I think specific into saying, okay, how do we look at information as a group? How do I show up when I look at information? And what are the things that are important to me to make sure I'm on the other end of an outcome for? So that's kind of the flow of what we're going to look at today. And it's really discussion based to hear what your individual thoughts are, how you feel you show up, and what's important to you. So I'm going to screen share just as a reminder. I wanted to bring us back to these DEI principles because it's been a month, and I don't know how your lives and worlds work, but for me, a month is a long time. A long time and a short time, and I often need memory jogging. So I wanted to step here, and Jorge, I see your hand up. Did you want to share something here? No, by accident. Okay. I wanted to land here just to see some initial thoughts around what do folks remember from this conversation we had together last time, the first time we met. Alexander, I know this is new to you, so it's also perhaps a time to hear a little bit of catch up. But what do folks remember? You can either just come off mute or you could put your hand up. And not specific necessarily to the terms or the principles, but more so to the conversation. I see Jorge. Oh no, I see Daniel.
Hi, good to see you again. I do recall that I feel like a lot of us were saying a lot of similar points that, although each had their own value, their own perspective, very much tied into the same, which was these are all these pillars are interconnected, and that we can't have one of them without the rest of them. So I think what that I've taken some time to think about, how that how that relates to what we're trying to do here. And I've definitely thought a lot more about how this is very much like a get your hands dirty kind of, roll up your sleeves sort of initiative. I think that I'll speak for myself in that I am, not as familiar with, working within a government agency or things like that. And I think the valued perspectives of what we're starting to bring is our own lived experiences, but also the honesty of that. And I think at the end of the day, what we're all, bringing is a true commitment. What that looks like for each of us is going to be very different in how we show up. But I believe that I think kind of what would probably be helpful with one of our next steps is figuring out what that actually looks like. And again, to Alexander's point as well, like an actual plan of these are the specific tasks that we're looking to accomplish, but also this is what the actionable items from each of those are for each of us.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Definitely hearing the summary of what a lot of folks shared was how interconnected these things are, how interdependent they are, and also some additional things that this task force particularly wants to bring to not change any of these principles, but really make them more robust or make them more in depth, put some meat on what each of these means. And I'm curious if anyone else has any other memories or recollections of things that came up when we had this conversation.
So I know for me, I remember like choosing one of these principles, but having the conversation with the other task force members, we realized that there was just all these intersections, and so we might start off with one principle, but then like maybe having touched several other principles, while we dive in. So they're all really like intersected. So it just makes for a more, like you said, a robust conversation.
Thank you, Queen Shayla. Jorge.
Yeah, I remember last meeting, we have a very good understanding what everybody about the principles. Everybody was giving good ideas. at the same time, I think that everyone have a different passion, you know. Maybe we can share because, you know, it's like my passion is like you know, to help other people, to be sure that everybody have a equal opportunity. So all the principles that we studied before last week, last meeting, I think that they go to different situations, you know. The principal and the most important thing is like we all have a way to look things, but at the end of the time, we are here just because we wanna help in any way possible to change, you know, people's life. Because if people this is struggling over there, and we just want the main thing is to have justice for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. Yeah, I think oh, go ahead, Marcus.
Oh, sorry. And I think what Jorge said, what Queen Shayla has said, I think that from my recollection of the last meeting is that we all of us come from different backgrounds. We live different experiences. We represent different parts of the communities, the workforce, organizations. And so our job is to apply all of these principles, including opportunity, vision, and listening, and apply that with each other, especially transparency and being able to communicate courageously, apply that with each other so that we're able to put boots on the ground, as they say, and get to work.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. What's the term? I'm really bad at sayings, but hit the nail on the head. With reminding this key point, right? That the DI, the principles were in some part an elevation of how each of us each of you shows up to the work with your lived experience, with the ways that you align to principles already, and holding that kind of responsibility to the external facing work that you will do as well as the work that you all do with one another, and really making it both a container for how you operate in general. There's without the boundary of with each other, with other people, with each other, with other people, but this is how we want to embody some value and principle into our orientation of the work. So I wanted to bring those points. I think you all spoke to them so beautifully around the intersectionality of all of them, how each of them kind of will peg the other in, and also that they are external and internal as much as they are external facing. There are ways that we can show up to these values in both of those. So we wanted to bring that as a reminder of our last meeting, particularly as we go into kind of what are the ways that you can orient yourself in terms of roles as committee members. Krupa, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, sorry. I had the thought, as you were sharing sort of how these apply to how we show up to the conversation, but also in our external facing work. What's sitting with me is the idea that we are an intentionally Black, Indigenous, person of color, Black and brown body within West Hollywood, tasked with helping West Hollywood figure out, how to solve systemic racism, right? A big charge. And I think these principles are so great and so critical to the way we show up. But I also feel like a stance we need to take, a core stance, has to be an anti-racist one, right? So as we're looking at the policies and practices of the city, I think Shannon was starting to get at this with talking about the demographics of the city or the demographics of city hall staff or whatever, right? Like, we know that Black and brown people are not in the majority of the demographics of the city as residents or of staff. And I think our job is to interrogate why. Like, where are the barriers to entry for Black and brown people to fully thrive in the city as residents, access our services, start businesses here and whatnot. And so I apologize for just going off on a soapbox, but I think that these in that sense, these are great, but still a little soft to me. And so I wonder from our group, just what your reactions to that are, if any, and where the kind of orientation lives if it's not in these principles.
I have a follow-up also with that. Again, I told you I knew I wasn't here last week, but I think going off of Krupa's idea is that because I understand why we are all people of color, Black and brown people, to kind of help do this, but because we are a minority group still, I have no problem in my own personal life having all of these things with other people of color because we all understand there's different things. But when you talk about honesty and integrity and this courageous communication, a lot of times it's going to be, you have to have it with the majority, correct? Like as a minority group, everyone can understand and commiserate in some way, but it's working with that majority and making them understand it and having them also step up to the plate with all of these things that's really going to actually create the change. Because as a minority, we're still minorities. We're still a minority group preaching to that majority, saying, please listen to us, take this seriously. We need people also on that side fighting this fight and having these, again, it's the harder conversations are harder to have with your oppressor versus with the people who you are kind of in the trenches with, if that makes sense.
That makes sense to me, Alexander. I'm curious, and just a question. You don't have to answer right away because I know other folks are hands up, but I'm curious from your experience if you've been in a group with other folks of color predominantly or solely where these principles have been violated. And I'll let you sit on it. I don't have to answer it right away, but I'm just offering it as a thought to just consider. Just to consider.
I think I'm sure I have. I want to say, like, I can't say I haven't, and I'm sure, as an Asian man, I'm gonna have a different perspective as a Black woman or trans Latinx, whatever it's gonna be. I deal a lot with the LGBT community as well, so we had that kind of whole minority group in just to make it more spicy. But I think that you do feel there is still more of an openness. So while you might not step up to the table 100% with all of these commitments, you're much more likely to step up 85, 90%, because you might not exactly, you might not understand the situations everyone's in, but your empathy level is much higher for that level than if you are to predominantly just say like white group where you go, I don't want to make too much of a splash, so I'm going to kind of silence myself because I don't want to halt the conversation or do something like that. So that's where I feel like I stepped the line less.
Got it. Thank you. I see in the queue, Jonathan, Jorge, Danielle, and Shannon, I see you coming off of mute. Are you wanting to share something?
I was, but I can wait.
Why don't you, we haven't heard from you, so why don't you kick us off and then we'll go Jonathan, Jorge, Danielle. Daniel.
I'm having a little trouble going back to a gallery mode for some reason, but the woman who spoke she was definitely getting at what I was getting at, and she's a part of the task force as well. I'm sorry. I know my glasses on are really small.
I think it's Krupa.
Krupa, yes, it is you. You definitely got to what I wanted to speak to. And, I think West Hollywood is built on these ideals of inclusivity and these ideals of which we aren't there yet, is what I'm trying to say. I think that it starts from the inside out. So if we're going to be this social justice task force, is such a great beginning and a great start. But that's why I was trying to get at, you know, what the inside looks like, because it starts from the inside out. And I hope that we can influence policy that looks like West Hollywood needs to look more like us. Not only that, I wanted to kind of say as well, when going forward with things like this, I think we have to be, like Krupa was mentioning, we have to really start just about what we look like. And West Hollywood can be the beacon of hope. And it could be kind of like the go-to, you know, it could be the go-to of what, I don't know, I'm blanking here, but it could be something that other cities follow suit. But I don't think we're doing that now, but I think this is a good starting point, is what I was trying to say. So that's all.
Thank you, Shannon. Go ahead, Jonathan.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak. Short answer is I agree with Krupa in that, these are the right things as the baseline. And I did like the question that you posed, Crystal, around how we experience this with other people also that may look like us. And truth of the matter is, I have seen these things violated in my own personal experience. I've done a lot of work in the community and I've seen these things violated in multiple conversations. That's the short answer to yes. So I think this is good for us to start off with, but maybe there's an and to this, right? Which is, what do we think of from a BIPOC advocacy standpoint? What are the BIPOC advocacy principles that we want to all agree on as well? So maybe it's just, there's a part two to this, right? I don't know if that's the answer, but that's kind of my initial thought from a solutioning standpoint. And sorry, sometimes I do go into solutioning mode. So that's just kind of my thought process.
Fantastic. No apologies needed. Jonathan. Jorge.
Hi again. I understand that we have different experience, in our life about not just our race or sexual orientation or social level, school, work, whatever. We all suffer different things. But I think that for us to be a justice task force is just to do the right thing for whoever needs it. We being a leader, I put myself when people ask me at work, so, what are you doing now in the city hall? I say, what I'm doing is that is what I do here. This is about doing the right thing for whoever. It doesn't matter what is your sexual orientation, what is your skin color, because we have to try to do everything. It's not about us anymore. It's about the community. I cannot see, okay, because somebody is gay or is represent my race, it's gonna be better for the person. I think that we are here to be just, because that the name saying, justice task force, to be right, do what is correct for everyone. So we need to put ourselves in that page too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. Daniel.
Thank you. I preemptively apologize if this is derailing the conversation just a little bit. But I feel like what we're each bringing to the table is within the back of our minds, respectively, is, a list of things that come to mind about specifics in terms of what we would like to see improved within West Hollywood. I think at least for me, what I would, definitely love to understand as it relates to, today's meeting, our meetings overall, just our structure in terms of how we're starting to address these issues, is what is the process that we're setting up in, discussing items like this, in having different speakers from throughout the organization. What does that workflow look like from education to research to actual action? I think, especially, and again, thank you, Krupa, for starting to call that out, is, I within the last month, I've written down a list of things that I definitely want to start talking about and specifics. I guess I would just love an understanding in terms of, as we continue to talk through items like this, what is the lens that we should be having on that as it relates to actual action?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll say there's two levels, right? There's the level of what is the work that we're looking at and what is it that we're doing? And that level from the work the Aspire group does is always a primary level. It's the urgency level. It's the level that brings us all to the table. And also from the work that we do, we see the secondary level come up all the time around how do we do the work that we do? And unless that the space is provided to intentionally be thinking about that at every step of the action, there's a lot of ways that it can go off the rail, right? And so we offer this space as a time to be thinking about the how, the how, the orientation, to have this conversation, Krupa, in all honesty, that you broke open, right? It's not our intention to say these are the principles and these are the principles that the Aspire group holds when we work with each other. These are our personal team, our team ones. We offer them as a place for you as a group to throw against the wall and say, that doesn't work for us. That does work for us. And the work that we're doing specifically in the action that we're looking to in the context of West Hollywood, we need to be stronger in this way, or maybe we need to peel back in that way. But we offer it as a place for folks to start the conversation around what are our core internal operations for how we do the work. And so that is this part of the process meeting. And I say that saying that when it gets to the point of creating next steps, the amount to which you all want to drive in or pull back from the how conversation in some ways is led by you, right? So we offer it as a starting point, as a conversation, not as a conversation starter, but as a regulator for a group of folks who is getting on the same page here. And when it gets to perhaps an item that says, we want to develop our own part 2, as Jonathan put out on the table, we want to develop a part 2 of what this means for us, that perhaps that's an action item or something that comes up as a need for the task force. And so I appreciate your question. I hope that answered, or I hope that gave a rounded response.
Generally, yes. I think that this might be just again an ongoing conversation, and I know it's hard when we only meet once a month, and I'm sure many of us are passionate to just roll up our sleeves and get right into this and make change today. I think it's just in terms of how we on our end want to understand, what are the steps we have to take so that we can start doing that. Absolutely agree that this is a part of that. I think just wanted to get an understanding in terms of the steps that we're taking to be there.
It's a good question. I appreciate it, and we'll bring it to next step in just a minute. And I want to go through these role pieces because you all are already playing a lot of the roles that we outline in thinking about how do folks serve and how do we show up as committee members, not just as committee members period, but effective committee members and as a team. So I see John came on video. Do you have something to share here, John, before I move on?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that those next steps that Daniel's looking for will be something that we'll discuss after this item, and let's talk through, because I think that's what we're looking for from the task force. And the next several meetings will be to set that parameters and that workflow and that work plan, so that we can really understand where we go from here.
All right. Thank you, John and Daniel and everybody who spoke. I'm going to move us forward to just one of these three. And again, I'm going to turn on my light really quickly because I can't see. Hold on. Sorry, the sun dropped quicker than I thought it would. So the first role that we kind of offer up is kind of the role that you are playing into naturally and really comes up in this conversation around what are the next steps. And it's the role of the thought partner, right? So it's providing the input, it's thinking about, it's exploring all implications, any and all implications. It's identifying the key service areas that need to be reviewed and helping shape any kind of strategies that need to come out. It's the definition, it's the defining, it's exactly kind of what we're doing around where is the core of this work and how are we shaping it. And so that's the role of the thought partner that sometimes you will be playing, right? When we're talking about very particularly like what are the principles that this group wants to operate in, that requires thought partnership from everybody on the team because everybody is thinking about how am I going to show up. And you all have some almost complete control over that sphere of influence. And in other instances, there are places, as John was sharing, in terms of departments and the questions that you all are really getting in the nitty gritty about is like, what is the process? So there's the role of the process monitor. When do we step into the place of like, perhaps this is a little bit, this isn't within the control specifically or only of this task force, but there is a role in picking apart the process that we have here and an opportunity for. So that is, you know, bringing up any recommendations or observations around like, that didn't sound right, or can I get a little bit deeper in here? It's monitoring any kind of recommendations that you make. So it's like if we say next meeting, we're gonna do this, and next meeting happens and it doesn't happen, the role of the process monitor is the one that says, hey, we said we are gonna do that and it didn't come up, or I didn't get the information about that, right? In order for me to help make the decision. So recognizing that there is a space for process monitoring around the completion of all the tasks, and also not just the completion of the tasks, but the operation of how they show up, knowing that operation is often a place where inequity gets amplified, right? So being really clear about how do we be extra scrupulous in looking at the operation of how we come together and the operations of the things that the departments that we're talking to, the projects that we're diving into, the external services that we're bringing in. So that's the role of the process monitor. And we talk about the third as being the role of the ambassador. So the ambassador is really taking advantage of the opportunities that you have to, you know, share what you're hearing from other people in the community all the time. So I think about this one as kind of like the one that doesn't have to name names, but it's like, look, let's be honest. I heard, I'm a committee member, and I heard from someone when I was out or when I was at dinner that this is a real life issue for community members. And maybe it's not for me, or maybe it isn't for my immediate circle, but I saw it happen, right? And I'm going to bring it to this space, but really blending the needs of that the role of this committee and being a committee member here extends beyond the space and time of being in the meeting, but that data gathering is happening all along the way. And to some extent, which ways do you intentionally or unintentionally allow that messaging to operate both ways? So how do community members know that you're somebody that can be spoken to at certain times? How do they know when it's not, when it's not appropriate, right? But what is the negotiation of being in this role of an ambassador and really sharing to other people the goals and intentions of what any initiative you all put together is? So that is the kind of, when we think about what are the intentional ways that we can show up and making sure that, you know, how I'm putting things on the table has purpose, and how I might feel like this has direction in some way, that some of these roles can help. They're not the only defining roles, right? But they are roles that can help to say, oh, that's why this is important to me. Or let's have this group really, like, I might not be so strong on process monitoring because I really am big picture. So I'm a big picture thinker, and I'm always going to go to being a thought partner, or I'm always going to go to being ambassador. But when are the times that I really need to be really hyper focused on process? Or who are the committee members on my team that I can go to reach out for, that I know are really strong process monitors, to kind of be in conversation about this thing as we look forward to it. So I know that we're kind of coming towards some end on time, but I just want to stop and just think about these three: the thought partner, the process monitor, and the ambassador, and ask, you know, for you all to, if you were to kind of say which one is your dominant or which one feels like something that you naturally attract to, what would that be for you? And then which one feels like it might be more of a challenge? That's not your instinctual way to show up. It's not the way that you kind of do by habit, right? So what are some of the activities that you won't habitually do, but you might need to work on or advance or seek assistance in? And so I'm just gonna hold that there and see if anybody would like to share which of these they feel like they strongly connect to and which one feels like it might be more challenging. Shannon.
I think because I do so much community work and I'm on the ground, that it'd be a great ambassador because, you know, that's what I do every day. If I'm feeding the homeless or trying to find clothing or housing for people. What I probably wouldn't be great at is process monitor because I barely take notes. I won't remember if somebody said that they were going to do it and not do it because I took horrible notes. So that's probably me.
Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate your honesty. Daniel.
I giggled because I relate to Shannon's honesty as well. Especially as my ADHD kicks in, it's I think that that in itself lends me to be kind of gravitate towards thought partner mostly, and then yeah, I would say my challenge areas, which also apply to several other areas of my life, are also process monitor.
All right, I see Queen Shayla.
So I think I'm going to agree with my fellow task members. The ambassador, because I got that. I heard very well. I got that down packed, what I heard, right? And then I think the process monitor would be where I would have some attempts, but I would definitely have some challenges.
Jonathan.
It's funny because I really gravitate towards thought partner. Like I love hearing people's ideas and seeing what we can do together. It's weird, but the other side of it too is that I can see myself in this group, and I wouldn't say I'm normally not an ambassador, but I can see myself in this group with everybody being an ambassador, me deciding to not be an ambassador as much, and me jumping towards the process monitoring. I could see myself doing that, but I actually think I do all three of those because I do consulting. That's just what I do for a living. So I do all three of these, but I can see myself saying, I'm not going to be an ambassador right now. I'm just going to focus on what people are saying and how we're doing it. So that's kind of my thought process around this. I don't know.
I see Jorge.
Yeah, I see myself as a top partner because I like to work as a teamwork. You know, I like to do things with different people and trying to get it together in the same idea.
How do I raise my hand in this? I don't actually know. I'm just kind of like awkwardly doing this.
I see you though. I'm gonna say Marcus and then Alexander. I think you can raise your hand by going to the participant list. Like if you click participants, but I'm gonna let someone else give that direction actually.
You can press more and then
Yeah, I got it. I'm with you.
Oh, cool. So Marcus and then Alexander and then Shannon.
I definitely say I'm either a thought partner or an ambassador. I'm really big on community engagement and, you know, trying to be out, listen to people about their concerns and thoughts and ideas. So definitely an ambassador.
And Alexander.
I think, funnily enough, I usually will gravitate towards something like a process monitor person. because I'm so detail oriented with my job. And I also am the president of an LGBT nonprofit. So like I have to take all the notes and kind of keep everybody on track. I'm usually the annoying one with emails. I like to think of myself as like an easy breezy thought partner, but at a certain point, as I said, I'm a doer. So if too many ideas go up in the air, I'm like, we're just gonna spend the whole time having ideas. But if we can't do any of them, then there's really no point to having ideas that can't be implemented. So honestly, I'll probably go to process monitor first because I am anal like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of reflection.
Yeah, I see. I'm curious to hear from Krupa. Who else are we missing?
I believe Giselle as well.
And Giselle. If any of them come for you, Krupa.
I saw Marcus's hand up for a while. So were you trying to say something before I jump in?
No, I already went. So
Oh, you did. Oh, wait, but your hand was, sorry. I thought you wanted to come back. Yeah, I think I was just laughing and smiling, listening to everybody. But like, I think I naturally gravitate towards or prefer or in a happier place if I'm a thought partner or ambassador. But I sort of had the same reaction, which is like, wait, what's like, where are we in our process when like I don't know what's going on, in the sense of like, how are we going to get to the outcome? So with like framing, I can sort of like be in my happy place, but when I feel like I don't know where we are in our journey, I might poke a little bit at process, but it's not my happy place when I'm there. Oh, sorry. Yes, I do still have a landline. We can talk about that another time.
Giselle, go ahead.
Yeah. So, opposite of Krupa, I'm digging the process monitor. Instinctually, I'm a project manager by trade, and it's not only about the little details, but evaluating the process overall, seeing what works well, what does not work well, as we work to a means to an end. And yeah.
Thank you. I think we've heard from all the task force members. Please tell me if I'm wrong. Jorge, is your hand raised to share?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that we can have the opportunity to mix all together because I don't know, I have idea, I don't know how the group can take it, because it's so popular now to have a WhatsApp app, maybe we can, if people disagree, we can sign, there and start oh, how are you guys? Good morning. Just like a break in the ice. So we can bring ideas to that thing because it's like I'm not waiting for every 1 month, Like I say, it would be cool, like I start with little by little because, we don't know each other. We're trying to be there in the same place because we're going to be here doing the same. So I think that, I don't know if you guys would like the idea to start something like that because it's very popular now. It's, every group at work, family, they have to stand that, it's a way, to start building something bigger.
I think that technically in the rules, because it has to be a public forum, basically we're not allowed to speak about any actionable items without having a public forum open to the public. So we're not actually allowed to do that unless it was like a, hey, good morning, everybody, and then we're good. But don't want to rain on that parade. But
hashtag process monitoring.
I just did orientation like last week. And so let me tell you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Brown Act prohibits us from communicating outside of a public meeting. We'll, after we're done with this item, we'll go on to the staff comments and we can talk a little bit more about the action plan and our next steps.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I think that this part of the meeting holds some of that intention, right? In the sense of what we just did, and I hope this landed for folks as well, is getting to hear from each other that this group is heavy-handed in thought partnership and ambassadoring, right? And so what does that mean for the way that we orient our work? And there are a few folks who can lend themselves to process monitoring. And this is not to say that, you know, just because that is your strong point, that's where we're going to rely on you all the time. This is to say that there are folks who hold some strength there and will ask the rest of the team to come to that line, right? We'll elevate the rest of the team to say, look, we all need to be better at process monitoring. And there's some expertise around how to do that in this group. And there's some space for other folks to grow. And then there are some spaces where ambassadorship and thought partnership will hold the strong line, right? And that this gives you all just a little bit of self-naming, and it is, you know, general, but we offer it as a framing to say, how do we hold our work to each other, with each other? Who do we know to rely on? Who am I going to show up in, and who is the rest of the group that I'm showing up for? And we hope that this helped in kind of getting that relational space between how we're coming. And then we'll talk more, but I'm going to transfer us out. I know that there's a lot of need to get to next steps, and I'll give it to John. Who am I giving it to do that?
Sure, I can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. And so I think that after this conversation, I can say that we as staff are somewhat process monitors as well. So we can take up some of that work and make sure that we stay on track. So one thing that I think we want to hear from the group is kind of what stuck with you tonight, or what are your thoughts about next steps? What would you like to hear about more, or what do you want from us as staff? I think that one thing that's clear to me, and we can bring forward at the next meeting to talk about, and we can put together a framework in advance that can be edited in any way the task force wants, but we'll put together a framework to start with, is the action plan and kind of the next steps for the group, and what the next few meetings look like in terms of developing a work plan, who else we want to hear from, what groups we want to hear from, and how the next set of meetings go. So we can put that framework together as a starting point for the group, but I do really want to hear from everybody about what kind of stuck with you tonight, and what would you like to provide us in terms of advice on. I see, let's do Daniel, Jonathan, and then Alexander.
Great, thank you, John. I think kind of going back to the point I made earlier is, you know, I'm definitely, again, admitting that I'm not the best with process, want to make sure that I'm respectful of our space, of our time, and all of that, and making sure that we're getting to things appropriately. I guess what would be helpful to understand is what is the, if there is, or how we collectively create this, the process for which we start to address issues. Is it, you know, we have a virtual whiteboard, we just all start writing out this, I want to touch on this, 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 you know, and then we start to, you know, bring in the you know, the appropriate parties. You know, I've done a little bit of research on my end as well in terms of how, you know, at least on my list, you know, the topics that, you know, I find are very relevant, and, you know, what the historical context of that has been within not just West Hollywood, but, you know, Los Angeles as a greater issue and things like that. So I think that that would be helpful in terms of where we look at from a process, you know, idea to action.
Yes, I think that's good. And I think that maybe even what I would suggest for the next few meetings is maybe we segregate the meetings into certain parts, where one is continued kind of education and research on topics that the task force wants to hear about. But then there's also another section about ideas and the starting of recommendations, so that we can have that discussion, and that can build on the other component as well. So like, let's say at the next one, we hear some more about X, Y, and Z topics, but we also start to have a discussion about action items and recommendations. Well, out of that action items and recommendations discussion, we're going to hear more things that we need to hear about as well at future meetings. So I think we can start to compartmentalize the meetings a little bit more into those different buckets, if that works for the group.
Yeah, that'd be super helpful. And I think one question that I have, and I know that this definitely relates to what we just discussed as far as the Brown Act and making sure that everything is public, in terms of how we continue to have conversations and, you know, our own research within our own community. You know, I definitely have not forgotten the public speakers that, you know, were at our last meeting. You know, I know that we definitely want to make sure that we're listening to them. Is there, you know, what is the appropriateness of, you know, doing our own research, having their own conversations? Like, I guess I would just love to get an understanding in terms of, does everything have to happen here, or is there space to appropriately, you know, do our due diligence outside of these meetings?
So the real limitation is conversations between the task force members. So as a task force member, you can do your own research. You can talk to individuals in the community. You can talk to any individuals you want. You can talk to us as staff. You could have one-on-one conversations with other task force members. It becomes an issue when there's groups of task force members having conversations amongst themselves, or when task force members start having conversations about the same things. So if Daniel, if you had a conversation with Jonathan and then with Krupa and then with Giselle about something, that's called a serial meeting. And so it's really, I would say that the key takeaway is doing your own research, talking to people outside the task force, talking to us as staff is all okay. Kind of the pinch point is talking to other task force members when we're not within this public setting.
Good to know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Let's do Jonathan, Alexander, and Marcus.
Thank you, John. So for me, first of all, I want to say I love this group because I think we all have a lot of different complementary kind of perspectives. One of the things that if I had to think about like the framework for which we may want to think about, I would think about one thing, like part one is listening, right? And then the part two would be more of synthesizing the information. And then the part three would be enabling, right? And so that if I had to think about it, I think of it as a change management initiative in my mind. And so with that said, you know, one area that I'd love to focus on from a listening perspective is understanding more from BIPOC business owners that are in West Hollywood or do business with West Hollywood, or have customers that live in West Hollywood, right? So all of that would be something that I would love to add to my listening, or add to the listening area. So.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Jonathan. Let's do Alexander, Marcus, and Shannon.
Thank you, John. You kind of covered this already because I kind of echoed a little bit of what Daniel was saying. I think one thing that I am always nervous about something like this is, I actually sat in on a different group's meeting months ago, and what ended up happening was nothing got done. Everything was tabled for the next month. And, when we say we're going to use a couple meetings to discuss something, that's 4 months of the year. So like, I understand there are processes, and I am a person who likes to follow those kind of rules and things. But I think that truly the only way that we're going to be able to get things done that's not like an extra bike lane or something like that is going to be having to do like some work on your own that's kind of that we all just decide as a task. I don't want to use the word homework, but you have a month to do it, and then at least we can come to the table and we had a question, we all researched to hopefully find some answers, and now we can discuss those answers and see what our next steps are, because that's the way that actually change is going to happen. Because I think that we can always learn more. So there'll always be more education for people to come here, and we're always going to have discussions on these kind of things. But again, if 8 months goes by and we haven't done anything, then we've identified a lot of problems, but we didn't actually, why were we all here? Unless we're just a focus group to find problems, which I don't think any of us thought that that's what we were joining.
I think that's good. And I think that one of the things I would suggest is that we can start to have a part of the agenda where we talk about some of the issues. And as a group, the task force can identify what some of those key issues are. If more research needs to be done, we can form subcommittees within the task force to look at them. But staff is also a resource. So you can ask us to perform research on certain things. We can have meetings with the subcommittees and work on those items and then bring them back to the task force as well. So I think that it is good if task force members start to think about, particularly in this early stages, issues or things you would like to look into more. Like, I know we talked a lot about the contracting and RFP process. If we want to have a further discussion about that, and if there's more information we want to hear about that and form a subcommittee for that, that's something we can do and start to move specific things forward while also kind of keeping an open portion of the agenda for new ideas that come up.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Marcus, Shannon, and Jorge.
Definitely what Alexander said, and also a little bit of what Daniel said. Could we, like by the next meeting, could we get in black and white a roadmap to where the action starts, to where we start doing what we need to do? And then when has the city made a decision on if we're going to all be in one room, or how would the future meetings work now that the restrictions have been lifted?
Sure. So I think we can definitely provide a draft roadmap by the next meeting, but I don't want it to be us dictating exactly what that roadmap looks like. So I think we can put pen to paper and provide that draft, but we really want the task force's input on that so that it looks correct to all the members. But I think that it is important for us to put that draft together and have a starting point for the group, so we can do that. In terms of in-person meetings, this was discussed at our council meeting last night. We're looking at likely a September date for when we start to have in-person meetings. So I think that our next two social justice task force meetings, July and August, will likely be virtual. And then there's the potential for an in-person one in September. I think that one of the things we'll also start to do that I just kind of noticed throughout tonight is when we're doing presentations, I know it's really difficult when we're doing presentations to also have conversations because we can't see each other. So I think that once conversations start to get going during presentations, we'll take the presentation down so that at least everybody can see each other and we can have more of a group conversation. I know it doesn't replicate in person, but we'll be there quite shortly. Let's go to Shannon, Jorge, and then Jonathan.
Thank you, John. I'd let you see me, but I don't know how to flip my camera around. So you'd just be looking at my dog. I'm glad everyone kind of said, or, said action. That word came up a lot, and I'm very into that. Tasks, when we started this and when we were applying, I had ideas, for me, social justice looks like homelessness and food insecurity and, bringing back like the MET program. So discussing those things, I would love to find a way to bring our ideas to the floor when talking about, food insecurity. I have so many ideas. I think West Hollywood should have a food coalition. I recently participated in Out on Robertson, and we are supporting these restaurants and these businesses. David Cooley is there. Lisa Vanderpump is there. We're all there for these photo ops. But what are we doing with that food? And you can see the increase in homelessness. And you know that we need food insecurity. So, or we know that we have food insecurity. So why isn't the Social Justice Task Force starting a community fridge or starting these outreach programs in which we can help our community directly? So action is what I would like to be about. And that's what I think all of us have come here to do. We wouldn't be doing West Hollywood any service if we didn't implement these ideas to make our community better places to live. And I think West Hollywood is different too, because most of us are fortunate enough to, even during a pandemic, have bellies that are full or roofs over our heads. And that's what the pandemic taught us, right? That we are so lucky that we had any of those things. We might not be balling, but we have the things that the homeless people don't have, that, you know, some members of our community, retirement, people in retirement homes, or in these buildings that have, you know, they have maybe Section 8 or something like that. I feel like we should be talking on how not only we get social justice is bigger than just police brutality. It's making a better community for West Hollywood. And I think that's what we really have to focus on. So that's me done.
Great, thank you, Shannon. And I would, if there are specific topics, I hear homelessness and food insecurity from Shannon. If there are specific topics that anybody is thinking about, feel free to send that over to Jasmine and myself, and we'll include those in the list of items that we can talk about within kind of the action plan. Let's go Jorge, Jonathan, and then I think Alexander and Marcus have their hands again.
Well, the same for me, you know, I'm a person of action, and I always like to, it's nice to have different opinions from people, but I think that we need to focus more in trying to do something that is real. It's gonna be real, you know. See, like Shannon just said, you know, it's people out there that they really need our help right now. For me to be just having some, waiting to see how we're gonna help when we can start doing something right now, you know. I was thinking too, when it's gonna be the groups in person. Sometimes I feel like my hands are tied when we just gonna have this like a monthly, when, you know, when really is people right now struggling right there. We know we just passed a pandemic, and it's people that they have different kind of issues. It's people that they lose their job, you know, they don't have to wait to pay the rent, and we just look for something to trying to bring peace of mind for some people, you know, equality. I think like I said, I'm a person of action. For me to make this, make it longer when, you know, we are comfortable in our houses, you know, having a plate of food, but it's not everybody have that right now. So yeah, let's see how we can do. Thank
you. And I think that part of the action that we can take quickly is, you know, and to move things forward, is we can form some of those subcommittees to work through items on a more efficient basis. And that's a way to have a meeting more than once a month, is the subcommittees and the task forces can meet sooner. Let's do, sorry, it's getting a little bit not in the same order over here. So I'm gonna do Jonathan, Alexander, and Shannon. I hope that's the right order.
Yeah, so I do think that action based on our lived experiences and opinions are great. At the same time, I think it's very important that we listen to what others are saying, as well as what each other is saying. And that way we can help prioritize from that perspective. I did want to ask you the question of whether or not we can do kind of semi-monthly meetings, you know, for maybe the next 2 months, and then we jump to the committees piece, because that way we can accelerate the process of listening. Because I do think listening is very important. The other question I had for you, well, maybe I'll ask that question first, and then I'll ask the other ones. Can we do semi-monthly meetings?
Let us look at that more on a scheduling standpoint. Let us look at the schedule, just because we have some other meetings at the middle of July, but we can try to schedule something sooner rather than later.
Great. Okay. The other piece too, then, do you want us to email thoughts on our roadmap? Because I'm always happy to send some thoughts on the roadmap. I love a good roadmap. All right, cool. I'll do that. And then other piece too, you were talking about RFPs earlier, and I'm on that page. So I'd love to understand what the RFPs that need to be scheduled for that are scheduled for the remainder of the year. So if you can maybe add that to the list, and then also what the RFP process looks like currently today, like the as-is process.
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm on all that page. So thank you.
Let's do Alexander.
I was just gonna say that because I am an action person and I am these kind of things. I was gonna ask if it seems like a lot of people are referring to like their ideas that they have, and I'm sure everyone has some. So one, with the processes, I know that we can't talk about something that's not on the the itinerary. What is it called? The
agenda.
Agenda. Thank you all. We can't talk anything on the agenda. Can we leave it open, like a broader statement there that just says like new ideas instead of like listing it out? Because if you forget one, or if like one brings up another one, if you know Daniel has a great idea and I'm like, I never thought about something like this, but what about this? I want to make sure we're not kind of like halting that conversation because of the processes that we have to go through here. So that's my first part of my question.
So we do have to be careful about that, because what the agenda process is meant to be is that the public can be involved in discussions that the task force is having. So we have to agendize items with an actual subject matter. We can agendize items as, you know, future topics for discussion, and we can have suggestions and kind of limited discussion about that. But we have to agendize specific topics that the task force is going to discuss, so that the public can come and make public comment if they want, or listen to the discussion, and so that they know what discussions will be had.
So that has to be super specific. Like, again, we can't just say for next meeting, we're going to have a section called like ideas that you have for West Hollywood, or like in terms of category name. That's fine, I guess. And then, yeah, sorry.
And we can have an item that's kind of upcoming action items. And I think that that would probably address that topic, and we can have the task force members bring forward items they're interested in discussing. My guess is that there will be a number of items that will come up, and so we likely won't be able to have in-depth discussions during that meeting on those items anyway, because we'll have a couple of items probably coming from each task force member, and so that will be a lengthy discussion anyway. So I think that we can kind of address that on upcoming items, and we can bring those forward at a future meeting for future more in-depth discussion, or establishing a subcommittee for them.
Great. And then my other half of the question is just for everyone. Like, if we could take all those ideas that you've been sitting on now for months, me for like 3 hours, but they're there, and email those all, so that when we start next week, you know, there's probably going to be a lot of overlap. So obviously you don't have to put like housing ×5, because like it's on the thing. But I think it'd be good if we start to literally just compile that list of what everybody is thinking, and like obviously we'll prioritize, and we will see like, oh, this is like a big thing, so this is going to be a long-term thing, but this is a shorter one that we can maybe accomplish in 3 months, so that we can all just kind of get an idea of where all of our thoughts are, because as we've said, we're a lot of individuals who have a lot of different experiences and want to address different things, and I think that it's good just to get all of our heads in the same place.
And I will say that that is a way to have that discussion. So if via this meeting we are asking for suggestions and issues from the task force members, and if the task force members email us those items, then we can include it in the documents for that agenda item. And if we include that list within the documents for the agenda item, then that is on the agenda, and that's noticed that we can have those discussions about those items. And I think that it's good to set a priority level of, you know, certain things are longer term, certain things are shorter term, because the ultimate direction that the council gave for the task force is the council is looking for policy recommendations and program recommendations from the task force. So ultimately, we could bring some of those back in a shorter term if we wanted to, as a status update to the council, or we could bring them back longer term as some of the larger ones to the council. But that's ultimately our goal, is to bring back recommendations to the council for the council to consider and implement.
Thank you.
I don't see anybody else with their hand up. Is there anybody else that wanted to comment on this before we adjourn for the night? Okay, Jasmine, do you want to finish off?
Sure. Big thank you to city staff that participated. Thank you, John. Thank you to Crystal. And with that, the task force will adjourn to its next meeting scheduled for July 27th via teleconference.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye all. Good
Thank
night.
you. Have a good night.
Nice to meet everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Hmm.